The evening was unusually quiet, the kind of quiet that seemed to stretch across the walls and seep into every corner of my little house. I had just finished preparing dinner. A pot of chicken soup simmered gently on the stove, filling the air with the comforting aroma of herbs, tender meat, and fresh vegetables. A basket of warm cornbread sat on the counter, its golden crust glowing under the kitchen light. I wanted everything to feel warm, safe, and inviting. My daughter-in-law had left to stay with her mother, asking me to watch over my 7-year-old granddaughter, Lucy, for a few days. I thought it would be simple enough. After all, Lucy had always been my sunshine, soft giggles, clumsy steps, and a bright smile that reminded me of her mother. But that night, when I called her to the table, something was different. Her small footsteps echoed faintly from the living room, each one hesitant, as if she were stepping into unknown territory. She pulled out the chair slowly, the scraping of wood against the floor sounding far louder than it should have in that silence. She sat upright, her thin arms folded neatly in her lap, and her round, solemn eyes fixed on the steaming bowl in front of her. "Eat up, sweetheart, it's still warm," I encouraged, sliding the cornbread closer to her. But Lucy didn't move. She held the spoon in her tiny hand, hovering it above the soup, frozen in a silent battle I couldn't see. Her lips trembled, and finally, in a voice so faint I almost missed it, she whispered, "Am I allowed to eat?" The words pierced me like a blade. For a moment, I thought I had misheard her. My chest tightened, but I forced a smile and reached out to stroke her shoulder gently. "Of course, my love. Of course you can eat. Grandma made this just for you." The moment my words left my lips, Lucy's eyes flooded with tears. Her shoulders shook violently, and she broke into sobs so raw, so heart-wrenching they filled the little kitchen with an ache I had never known before. The spoon slipped from her trembling hands, clattering against the table in a dry, echoing sound that seemed to lodge itself deep inside my heart. I leaned closer, trying to hold her. "Lucy, honey, what's wrong?" But she only cried harder, burying her face in her tiny palms as if the world had collapsed upon her fragile frame. That night, as I held her in my arms, feeding her spoon by spoon, I realized this was no ordinary sadness. This was fear, rooted deep, too deep for a child her age. And in that moment, I knew something was terribly, terribly wrong. After dinner, I tried to lighten the mood. I carried Lucy into the living room, turned on an old cartoon show she used to laugh at, and poured her a glass of warm milk. The soft glow of the lamp filled the room, and the familiar jingles of the cartoon spilled into the air like fragments of an easier time. "Here, honey," I said gently, placing the glass on the coffee table in front of her. "Drink your warm milk. It'll help you sleep." Lucy didn't move right away. She sat curled in the corner of the couch, hugging a pillow tightly against her chest as though it were a shield. Her big, round eyes flickered between the milk and me, filled with a kind of hesitation I couldn't name. Then, in that trembling voice again, she asked, "Can I drink it, Grandma?" The words chilled me. My smile wavered, though I tried to keep my tone steady. "Yes, sweetheart, of course you can drink it. No one will stop you here." Only then did she reach out with both hands, clutching the glass as if it might be taken from her. She sipped slowly, cautiously, like someone testing forbidden waters. My heart twisted with every small gulp she took, and I couldn't stop staring at her the way her shoulders tensed, the way her eyes darted nervously toward the door, as though expecting someone to appear and snatch her comfort away. Later that night, I helped her prepare for bed. She arranged the blanket and pillow with meticulous care, smoothing every corner as though perfection were a requirement. But she didn't lie down immediately. She stood there, eyes locked on me, waiting. "It's late, Lucy," I whispered. "Go ahead and sleep now." She didn't move. Instead, she asked, in that doubtful, broken tone, "Grandma, can I turn off the light now?" The question hit me like a cold wind. I walked over, turned off the switch myself, and lay beside her on the small bed. Her little body trembled even under the covers. I stroked her hair, whispering soothing words until her breathing slowed and she finally fell asleep. But even in slumber, her eyelashes glistened with tears, and the corners of her mouth twitched as though she were fighting battles in her dreams. I lay there in the dark, staring at the faint moonlight filtering through the window, my chest aching. Lucy's whispers haunted me. "Am I allowed to eat? Can I drink this? Can I turn off the light?" These were not questions a child should ever have to ask. That night, I realized something unspeakable was hiding behind her eyes, a fear that went far beyond sadness, a shadow pressing down on her tiny soul. Sleep did not come easily to me that night. Even as Lucy's soft breathing filled the small room, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling. My thoughts drifted back to brighter times, to the days when laughter echoed in our home, before grief and silence crept in. I could still picture Maria, my first daughter-in-law, as clearly as if she stood before me. Her presence had once lit up our family like the morning Sunday. She was gentle, graceful, with a smile that could soothe any sorrow. I remembered her bustling around her kitchen, preparing her famous paella, the fragrance of saffron and seafood filling the air. She always made sure to bring a portion for me. "Mom, I made extra for you," she would say, her voice breezy and light. "You like it spicy, don't you?" I used to tease her, calling her a gift sent from God, and in my heart I truly believed she was. Back then, Lucy was just a toddler, clinging to her mother's skirt, repeating "Mommy, Mommy" in her sweet, high-pitched voice. Maria would scoop her up effortlessly, planting kisses on her chubby cheeks, her laughter ringing through the house. I thought those days of warmth would last forever, but life has a cruel way of stealing joy. Lucy was barely 2 when Maria discovered a lump in her breast. I remember the tremor in her voice when she called me one evening. "Mom, the doctor said something's not right. But don't worry, I'll be fine." Her words were brave, but I could hear the fear hiding beneath them. Our family plunged into battle mode. Anthony, my son, sold his beloved car to cover medical expenses. I lit candles in St. Michael's Church every night, my knees bruised from hours of prayer. We clung desperately to every sliver of hope, moving from one hospital to another, begging for miracles. But cancer is merciless. It devoured her strength, stole her glow, and finally, on the eve of Lucy's 5th birthday, it stole her life. I still remember the sound of Anthony's cries in the hospital hallway as he clutched little Lucy to his chest. His sobs were so raw, so broken, they left scars on my soul. Lucy, too young to understand, kept tugging at his shirt, asking softly, "Where's Mommy, Daddy?" I turned away, unable to meet her innocent gaze, because I had no answer. From that night on, everything changed. And though I tried to hold our family together, I knew Maria's absence had left a wound that could never truly heal. After Maria's passing, life seemed to move in slow motion. The house grew quiet, as though the walls themselves mourned her absence. Anthony tried his best to balance work and fatherhood, but his job as a construction supervisor kept him away for long stretches, sometimes a week at a time. "Mom," he once told me, his eyes weary, "I don't want Lucy to grow up without me. She's all I have left." I offered to keep Lucy with me, to ease the burden on him, but Anthony shook his head firmly. I understood his fear, his determination to be present, even when the world was pulling him away. And so, I visited often, bringing food, reading Lucy bedtime stories, and teaching her how to fold paper flowers to brighten her little room. For a while it seemed enough. Lucy still smiled, still clung to her rag doll, though at times a quiet sadness lingered in her gaze. I told myself she was healing, slowly, step by step. Then, one afternoon, Anthony called me with a voice that carried both excitement and hesitation. "Mom, I met someone in Toledo. Her name is Isabel. She's a widow, a good woman. I think she'll get along with Lucy." My heart sank and lifted all at once. Part of me was happy for him, my son, who had carried grief like a stone tied to his chest, finally sounding hopeful again. But another part of me hesitated. Lucy had lost her mother. Would her fragile heart be ready for a new one? The first time I met Isabel, she arrived at Anthony's home carrying a golden flan she had baked herself. Her smile was radiant, her embrace warm. She leaned down to stroke Lucy's hair and said sweetly, "She's adorable, Grandma. I'll love her as if she were my own." I wanted to believe her. I needed to believe her. Anthony's eyes shone that day, filled with a light I hadn't seen in years. And as I watched him standing beside Isabel, hope flickering in his tired face, I told myself maybe, just maybe, this woman could help rebuild what life had broken. 6 months later, Anthony and Isabel married in a modest ceremony. They moved into a small suburban house with white walls and a red-tiled roof, a place Anthony proudly called their new beginning. I visited on the day they moved in. Lucy ran around the yard with a ball in her hands, while Isabel unpacked boxes, humming softly to herself. She paused to brush a strand of hair from Lucy's forehead and said, "Careful, sweetheart, don't fall." I stood there, watching, my heart daring to feel peace. Perhaps happiness had returned. Perhaps the shadows that haunted Lucy's eyes would finally begin to fade. But I was wrong. When Isabel gave birth to David, a healthy, rosy-cheeked baby boy, the whole family rejoiced. Anthony called me in tears of joy, his voice bubbling with pride. "Mom, David looks just like Maria. He has those same big round eyes. You'll see it too when you visit." I knitted a soft wool blanket for my grandson and went to their new home. Isabel greeted me at the door, radiant, holding the baby as though he were made of gold. Her smile glowed as she placed him in my arms. "Isn't he perfect, Grandma?" she whispered, almost as if the world could shatter if spoken too loudly. I cradled David, but as my heart swelled, my gaze shifted to the corner where Lucy stood. She wasn't running about with her usual excitement. She wasn't smiling at her little brother. Instead, she hugged her old rag doll tightly, her eyes dark and distant as everyone fussed over the new baby. "Lucy, come give your brother a hug," I coaxed gently. She nodded but turned away, walking slowly toward her room, the doll still clutched in her arms. At first, I dismissed it as jealousy, an ordinary reaction for a child no longer at the center of attention. But as weeks turned into months, the change in Lucy deepened. Whenever I visited, Isabel greeted me warmly, the table covered with elaborate meals, stews, salads, her signature caramel flan glistening at the center. She always wrapped an arm around Lucy's shoulders, speaking to her in tender tones. "My love," she would say, "eat lots. You love stew, don't you?" And yet, while Isabel smiled, I noticed Lucy's hands clench into tiny fists beneath the table. Her eyes never lifted from her plate. Her spoon moved slowly, too slowly, as though every bite was weighed down with invisible chains. Anthony, oblivious, looked across the table with glowing pride. "Isabel takes care of everyone so well, Mom. I'm lucky to have her." And though I nodded, my heart stirred uneasily. I wanted to believe his words, but the more I looked at Lucy, the way her laughter grew scarce, the way her drawings vanished from the fridge, the way her little shoulders slumped, as if burdened by something unseen, the more a storm began to brew inside me. I told myself she only needed time, that she was still mourning Maria and adjusting to this new family. But in my soul I knew something wasn't right. At first glance, Isabel's home looked like the picture of warmth. The two-story house with its white walls and red-tiled roof always seemed immaculate, framed by a bougainvillea that bloomed crimson in the sunlight. Neighbors would wave as they passed, often remarking on how lucky Anthony was to have found such a devoted wife. Every time I visited, Isabel's performance was flawless. She welcomed me with a bright apron dusted in flour, the smell of fresh pie or stew drifting from the kitchen. She placed baskets of rolls or jars of orange marmalade on my table as gifts, her voice lilting with affection. "Mom, I made this just for you. Taste it and tell me if it's sweet enough." The neighbors praised her endlessly. "Your daughter-in-law is wonderful," Mrs. Miller from next door once told me. Always smiling, always caring for the children as if they were both her own. Those words should have eased my worries, but each time I looked into Lucy's eyes, my unease grew. The little girl was changing before my eyes. The chatter that once spilled from her lips faded to whispers. She no longer showed me her scribbled drawings or pulled me by the hand to see her dolls lined up in messy parades. Instead, she sat quietly at the table, chewing slowly, her gaze fixed downward. One summer afternoon, as Anthony and Isabel laughed together about a weekend trip, I leaned close to Lucy. "Sweetheart, is the soup not good? Do you want Grandma to get you something else?" Lucy startled, as if I had caught her in a secret. Her lips barely moved. "No, it's good." Her voice was so faint it was almost swallowed by the clinking of spoons. I turned to Isabel, searching her face. She only smiled serenely and stroked Lucy's hair. "She just misses her mom," Isabel said smoothly. "It's normal. She'll adjust." Her tone was gentle, her logic sound. Even Anthony nodded in agreement. And yet, behind the mask of calm, I thought I saw something flicker in Isabel's eyes. Something sharp, fleeting and unsettling. I told myself again that Lucy only needed time. But as I left that day, the silence of my granddaughter's footsteps trailing behind me spoke louder than any reassurance Isabel could give. Beneath that perfect facade, I feared a storm was quietly brewing. The heat of June pressed down heavily that year. The cicadas sang endlessly outside my window as I sat on the porch, fanning myself with an old paper fan. My thoughts, as always, drifted toward Lucy. Her silence haunted me, her downcast eyes, her trembling whispers, the way her small hands clenched whenever Isabel was near. The phone rang, breaking the stillness. It was Anthony. His voice carried a rush of urgency, tinged with unease. "Mom, Isabel and I need to go to Toledo for a few days. We'll take David, but it won't be convenient to bring Lucy. Can you watch her?" My heart leapt, though I tried to keep my voice calm. "Of course, son. I'll take care of her." The next morning, as sunlight spilled across my patio, Anthony's old car pulled up. He stepped out, looking tired but relieved. Isabel followed, carrying baby David swaddled in her arms. Lucy climbed slowly out of the car, her pink backpack dangling from her shoulder, her gaze fixed on her white shoes. Isabel handed me a bag neatly packed with clothes. "Mom, here's everything she needs. Remember, she tends to forget her jacket when going out, and give her warm milk before bed." Every word dripped with the sweetness of a devoted mother. I nodded, but when I bent down to hug Lucy, her little body stiffened. She forced a smile, but her lips trembled as though they couldn't hold it in place. Anthony stroked her hair softly. "Be a good girl for Grandma. I'll be back soon." Isabel crouched down and kissed Lucy on the cheek. "Listen to Grandma, my love." But the moment Isabel turned toward the car, I caught a flicker in Lucy's eyes, a brief flash of relief, as if a heavy weight had been lifted the instant her stepmother's back was turned. When the car disappeared down the street, I took Lucy's small hand in mine and led her inside. She placed her backpack neatly by the chair, removed her shoes, and lined them up perfectly against the wall, every motion careful, deliberate. I turned on the children's channel, hoping the cheerful songs would bring her comfort. But Lucy sat quietly on the couch, hugging a cushion to her chest, her eyes fixed on the floor tiles as though trapped in a place I could not reach. That night, as I tucked her into bed, the unease inside me sharpened. This was my chance to see the truth, and I prayed I was strong enough to face it. The following morning, sunlight streamed gently through the curtains, painting golden stripes across my small kitchen. I woke earlier than usual, wanting to surprise Lucy with a breakfast she used to love: toast drizzled with olive oil and crushed tomatoes, paired with a glass of warm milk. The aroma filled the air, a scent that once brought smiles and laughter. "Lucy, breakfast is ready, sweetheart," I called softly. She appeared from the living room, walking slowly, her small steps cautious, as if she carried an invisible burden on her shoulders. She sat down at the table without a word, folding her hands in her lap, her gaze fixed on the worn wood surface. I placed the plate in front of her and tried to sound cheerful. "Eat up, honey, and here's your warm milk, just the way you like it." Lucy reached for a slice of toast, but her hand froze midway. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "Grandma, can I eat this?" The question struck me like lightning. My breath caught, and though I forced a smile, inside I felt my chest cave in. "Of course, my love," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I made it for you." Only then did she take a small bite, chewing slowly, cautiously, her gaze still glued to the table. When her glass of milk was half empty, I leaned forward and poured her a little more. She looked up at me, her lips trembling. "Grandma, can I have more?" My throat tightened. "Yes, sweetheart, drink as much as you want." She nodded, taking the cup in both hands as if afraid it might slip away. She sipped slowly, hugging it close to her chest like a treasure. That sight left a lump in my throat I couldn't swallow down. Why would a child need permission for the simplest things: for bread, for milk, for life itself? After breakfast, I decided to walk her to school. On the way, we passed the neighborhood park where the air was alive with the sounds of morning. Flower vendors pushed carts, the sweet scent of fresh donuts drifted from a shop on the corner, and children's laughter rang out like bells. I stopped and bought Lucy a warm donut wrapped in a paper bag. Handing it to her, I smiled. "Here, my love. Eat while it's still hot." She held the bag in her small hands but didn't open it. Her eyes darted toward me nervously. "Can I eat it, Grandma?" The words burned in my chest. I nodded, brushing her hair gently. "Yes, darling. Please eat. It's for you." She finally tore off a small piece, nibbling slowly, as if even this tiny joy required caution. And as I watched her chew with her eyes lowered, fear pressed heavily against my heart. Something was terribly wrong. That afternoon, when I picked Lucy up from school, I tried to lighten the walk home with small talk. "Did you play with any friends today?" I asked. "Yes," she replied softly, her eyes empty, her voice almost mechanical. Her little hand in mine felt cold despite the warm Sunday. I bought her a heart-shaped balloon from a street vendor, hoping to spark a smile. But when I handed it to her, she only stared at it for a long time before whispering, "Grandma, can I keep it?" My throat tightened. "Of course, sweetheart. It's yours." At home, I brought out a box of crayons and paper, hoping to awaken some of the innocence she had lost. "Draw something for Grandma. You used to love drawing, remember?" Lucy picked up a crayon, her hand trembling slightly. She hesitated, glancing at me with uncertain eyes, and asked, "Can I draw?" I forced a smile and nodded. "Yes, honey, draw anything you want." Slowly, carefully, she began to sketch. A house, a woman, a man, and a little boy appeared on the page. I leaned closer. "Who are they, sweetheart?" Her voice was a whisper. "Mom and Isabel." My heart sank. "And why don't you draw yourself too? The family would look prettier." Lucy lowered her head. Her crayon slipped from her fingers, and tears welled up in her eyes, spilling silently onto the paper. I gathered her into my arms, feeling her small body tremble against me. "Do you want to tell Grandma something?" I asked gently, brushing her hair back. But she only shook her head, clutching my hand tightly as though holding on to a secret too heavy for her fragile heart. Later, at dinner, I made her favorite southern fish stew, hoping to comfort her. I placed a steaming bowl in front of her. "Try it, my love. Grandma made it just the way you like." Lucy picked up the spoon, then set it down immediately. In a broken whisper, she asked, "What if I spill it?" Her words stabbed through me. "If you spill, we'll clean it up together." "It's okay, Lucy. Nothing bad will happen here." She studied my face for a long moment, as if testing the truth of my promise. Only then did she take a small bite. She ate slowly, nervously, and when she finished, she carried her bowl to the sink and washed it carefully without being asked. Later that night, after neatly folding her blanket and pillow, she sat upright on the bed, her voice barely audible. "Grandma, can I go to sleep now?" I swallowed back tears and nodded. "Yes, sweetheart, go to sleep. Grandma is here." She lay down, turning her back toward me, sighing as though releasing a weight too heavy for a child to bear. I stroked her hair as she drifted off, her lashes still wet with tears. And in that moment, I realized the truth was closer than I had dared to admit. Sunday morning arrived with a gentle breeze, carrying the scent of blooming bougainvillea across my patio. The red petals danced in the sunlight, yet inside me, there was no peace. The weight of Lucy's every whispered question, "Can I eat? Can I draw? Can I sleep?" pressed against my chest like stones. I decided that fresh air might help her open up. I set a small table outside and poured 2 glasses of freshly squeezed orange juice, placing one in front of her with a smile. "Here, Lucy. Grandma made this just for you. It's sweet." She lifted the glass with both hands, took a cautious sip, and placed it back down. Her eyes never left my face, as though waiting for some sign of approval. "You don't need permission here, sweetheart," I said softly, leaning close. "If you're thirsty, drink. If you're hungry, eat. You can be yourself with Grandma." She nodded faintly but stayed silent, clutching the glass tightly as if afraid it might be taken away. I went inside, fetched a box of her favorite cookies, and set it on the table. "Have one, my love. Grandma bought these for you." Lucy reached for a cookie, but the moment her fingers touched it, her eyes filled with tears. The sight startled me. I bent down quickly. "What's wrong, sweetheart? Did I do something?" Her lips trembled before she whispered words that shattered me. "If I'm not good, they don't let me eat." The air seemed to vanish from my lungs. My heart stopped, then pounded painfully. My hands trembled as I reached for hers. "Lucy, what do you mean? Who doesn't let you eat?" She bit her lip, tears streaming down her cheeks. Then she clung to me, her small body shaking with sobs. "Mommy Isabel makes me wash dishes, clean the house. If I make a mistake, she won't let me have dinner. One day she cooked paella. It smelled so good, but she only let me watch. I was so hungry, Grandma." Her voice broke into pieces, each word like a knife carving into my soul. I pulled her into my arms, holding her tight, as if my embrace could shield her from all the cruelty she had endured. My granddaughter's secret had finally slipped into the light, and with it came a rage so deep, so fierce, it burned through every bone in my body. I kissed her damp hair and whispered, "You are safe now, Lucy. Grandma won't let anyone hurt you again." But inside, I knew this was only the beginning. The truth was far darker than I feared. Lucy's sobs quieted only after a long while, her little fingers clutching my sleeve as if afraid I might let go. I stroked her hair gently, whispering that she was safe. But her words echoed in my chest like thunder. "If I'm not good, they don't let me eat." I tilted her chin so she could meet my eyes. "Lucy, sweetheart, can you tell Grandma everything? Don't be afraid, I'm here." Her lips quivered, and fresh tears slipped down her cheeks. "Mommy Isabel, sometimes she locks me in a dark room when I break something. One time I dropped a glass, and she shut me in. It was so dark, Grandma, I was so scared." Her voice broke, and she buried her face against me. My arms tightened around her fragile frame, fury and grief boiling inside me. "She gives David candy all the time," Lucy continued in a trembling whisper. "But not me. If I want candy, I have to ask. And sometimes, even when I ask, she says no." Each word was another cut, another wound that I felt deep in my own soul. I closed my eyes, unable to stop the tears that burned hot down my cheeks. My granddaughter, only 7 years old, had been carrying these scars in silence. "Grandma, I don't want to go back," she said suddenly, her small voice desperate. "Please don't make me go back. I'm scared." I pulled her closer, kissing her forehead. "You won't go back, my love. Not while I'm here. I promise you." But as her sobs softened, my mind raged. Isabel had fooled everyone, Anthony, the neighbors, even me. She had built a mask of sweetness so perfect that no one suspected the cruelty beneath. When Lucy finally drifted to sleep that night, still clinging to my arm, I sat beside her and whispered a vow to the darkness. "I will not let silence bury this. I will uncover the truth, no matter what it costs." For the first time, I felt a clear purpose rising in my heart, a fire stronger than fear. The next morning, as Lucy sat quietly at the table nibbling at a piece of toast, I clenched my fists beneath the tablecloth. My heart burned with both sorrow and determination. I had heard enough from her to know she was suffering, but I needed more proof, voices beyond her trembling confessions if I was ever to protect her. After walking Lucy to school, I didn't return home right away. Instead, I made my way to the neighborhood where Anthony and Isabel lived. The street was calm, lined with tidy 2-story houses draped in flowers, their shutters painted bright colors. From the outside, it was a postcard of peace, but I knew better now. I stopped at the home of Mrs. Miller, the widow who lived next door. She was often outside, embroidering on her porch, her sharp eyes missing nothing. When she saw me approach, she set her needlework down and greeted me with a curious smile. "Mrs. Johnson, it's been a while since I've seen you around here." I forced a smile, though my voice trembled. "Mrs. Miller, I need to ask you something about Lucy." Her expression darkened instantly. She leaned closer, lowering her voice as though afraid the walls themselves might overhear. "I've seen things, Mrs. Johnson, things that broke my heart. Isabel isn't what she pretends to be." Once Lucy dropped a plate. Isabel made her kneel outside under the blazing sun for what felt like hours. The poor child was crying, begging to get up, but Isabel didn't move. She just stood there, watching. The words slammed into me like a blow. My chest ached, and I gripped the porch railing to steady myself. "Are you certain?" I whispered. Mrs. Miller's eyes glistened with unshed tears. Many times I wanted to intervene, but Isabel always locked the gate. She told me once to mind my own business when I knocked, but that little girl's eyes... She shook her head, her voice breaking. No child should ever look that way, like hope had been stolen from her. My heart was heavy, weighed down with rage and sorrow. I thanked her, though the words felt hollow. As I walked away, my mind burned with images: Lucy kneeling under the sun, tears streaking her cheeks, her tiny body punished for the smallest mistake. I didn't stop walking until I reached St. Michael's Church. Inside, Father Michael was tidying hymn books, his white hair glowing under the stained glass light. When he saw me, he smiled warmly. "Mrs. Johnson, it's been a long time. How are you?" I sank onto a wooden pew, my hands trembling. "Father, it's about Lucy." His smile faded, and his brows knit with concern. "Yes, I've noticed something. She hardly speaks during Mass anymore. When I try to greet her, Isabel answers for her, always saying she's just shy, but I don't believe it." I leaned closer, whispering the truth Lucy had shared with me. His eyes closed, pained as he listened. "I once overheard Isabel telling another parishioner," he said softly, "that children must be raised with a firm hand or they'll grow spoiled. Yet I've watched her shower David with sweets, toys, and endless affection, while Lucy is left standing alone." I felt a cold shiver run through me. Mrs. Miller's testimony, Father Michael's suspicions, and Lucy's own words. The puzzle was no longer hidden, it was forming clearly before me. I rose, my heart pounding with resolve. "Thank you, Father. I will not stay silent. Not anymore." As I left the church, the bells tolled above me, their echo carrying across the empty street. Each chime felt like a call, urging me to prepare for the battle I knew was coming. By the weekend, the storm inside me could no longer be contained. Isabel and Anthony returned from Toledo with little David in their arms, their faces glowing as if life were perfectly ordinary. But for me, the air was heavy with the truth I now carried. I had spent days watching Lucy's every gesture, her trembling hands, her cautious whispers. I had listened to Mrs. Miller, who saw her kneel under the blistering Sunday. I had spoken with Father Michael, who noticed the unnatural silence of a child stripped of joy. And above all, I had heard the broken words of my own granddaughter. That evening, I prepared a meal of stew and salad, hoping to create a calm setting before the storm. The table looked ordinary, yet I felt as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. Anthony sat down with a smile, Isabel beside him, her charm glowing as always. She poured wine into Anthony's glass and set David on her lap, cooing sweetly to him. Lucy sat across the table, her small frame tense, her eyes lowered to the plate before her. I took a deep breath, my heart hammering. Then I looked directly at my son. "Anthony, do you know that your daughter has to ask for permission just to eat dinner?" The room froze. Anthony blinked in confusion, his fork suspended in midair. He looked at me, then at Isabel. "Mom, what are you talking about?" Isabel didn't flinch. With a faint smile, she set her glass down. "Of course, Mom. Children need discipline. Eating is a privilege, not a right. I'm only teaching her to behave." Her words, delivered so softly, sliced into me like knives. I slammed my hand on the table, unable to hold back my fury. "That is not discipline, Isabel. That is cruelty. She is 7 years old. How can you starve a child to teach her manners?" Anthony frowned, his face tightening. "Mom, maybe you've misunderstood. Isabel has been nothing but caring. Lucy is more obedient now. Maybe—" His voice faltered, caught between loyalty and doubt. I pointed to Lucy. She sat motionless, her little fists clenched under the table, her eyes red but her lips sealed shut. "Look at her, Anthony, look at your daughter. She's terrified even to lift her spoon. That's not obedience, it's fear." Anthony turned toward Lucy, his face pale. But Lucy didn't move. She kept her head bowed, as if afraid that even breathing too loudly might provoke punishment. The room grew suffocating. David babbled happily in Isabel's lap, and she stroked him with tender hands, widening the cruel chasm between the siblings. Anthony looked at me, then at Isabel, his eyes clouded with confusion and pain. I knew in that moment he stood on the edge of truth, but he wasn't ready to leap. And Isabel? Isabel's eyes hardened, though her smile never wavered. She had mastered the art of wearing a mask. But mine had shattered. I would not stay silent any longer. The room felt like it was closing in on us. The smell of stew, once comforting, now turned heavy in the air, mingling with the sharp sting of unspoken words. My hand still trembled on the table, the echo of my outburst lingering like thunder after a storm. Anthony sat stiff, his jaw clenched, his gaze shifting between me, Isabel, and Lucy. His fork lay forgotten by his plate. "Mom," he began, his voice low, uncertain. "Are you sure you're not overthinking this?" Before I could respond, Isabel placed her hand on his, her tone soothing, practiced. "Anthony, please, don't be upset. Your mother only worries for Lucy. That's natural, but she doesn't see the whole picture. Discipline is necessary. Children must learn boundaries." Her words dripped with honey, but her eyes glinted with steel. Boundaries? I snapped, my voice breaking. She's 7 years old. Do you call it discipline when a child trembles before eating a piece of bread? When she asks for permission to drink milk? Look at her, Anthony. Look at your daughter. I reached across the table, touching Lucy's small hand. It was cold, rigid, her fingers curled tightly. She didn't raise her head, only whispered so faintly it nearly vanished into the silence. "I'm sorry, Daddy." My heart shattered at those words. Sorry for what? For being a child? For daring to exist? Anthony flinched as though struck. He leaned closer, searching Lucy's face, but she only buried her chin deeper into her chest. Isabel tightened her grip on his hand. See? She's just sensitive. Children this age exaggerate. Mom is making it worse by putting ideas in her head. I felt fire surge in my chest. No, Isabel. It is you who planted fear in her heart. You fooled everyone with your sweet words and your perfect meals. But the truth is written all over Lucy's silence. Anthony's face twisted with anguish. He pressed his palms against his temples, shaking his head. I don't know what to believe. David babbled happily in Isabel's lap, oblivious to the storm raging around him. She kissed the baby's cheek, her smile unwavering, as though nothing could touch her carefully constructed image. But when I looked at Lucy silent, trembling, her spoon untouched on the plate, I knew that the truth was undeniable. And I vowed, right then, that even if Anthony refused to see it, I would fight with every breath in me to protect her. The tension in the dining room thickened until even the sound of breathing felt too loud. Anthony sat frozen, torn between two worlds, his love for Isabel and his duty as a father. His hands shook as he tried to light a cigarette, but the flame sputtered out twice before he gave up, staring blankly at the floor. Lucy, still small and silent, clutched her ragged doll beneath the table as if it were her last anchor. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. The sight of her so fragile, so crushed, ignited a fire in me that I could no longer contain. Enough, I said firmly, rising from my chair. My voice cut through the room like a blade. This ends now. Isabel's smile faltered. She adjusted David in her arms and glared at me, her tone icy. This is our family, Mrs. Johnson. You don't get to tell me how to raise my children. Children? I spat the word out. You mean David, because the way you treat Lucy is not raising, it's destroying. Anthony finally lifted his head, his eyes red and bewildered. Mom, please, stop. You're making it worse. No, Anthony, I replied, my voice trembling but unyielding. I'm opening your eyes. You're too blinded by her smile to see your daughter's tears. Isabel stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. We're leaving. David doesn't need to hear this nonsense. She pulled Anthony's arm, urging him toward the door. But Lucy suddenly burst into tears, her little voice shattering the silence. Grandma, don't let me go back. Please, I'm scared. The room froze. Anthony staggered, his face paling as he turned toward his daughter. She clung to me desperately, her tiny fingers digging into my blouse, her body shaking like a leaf in the wind. Isabel's expression hardened. Lucy, enough of this act. Stop embarrassing your father. But it wasn't an act. It was truth raw, undeniable truth finally breaking through the cracks of silence. I pulled Lucy into my arms, her tears soaking my shoulder, and turned to face them both. I will not let her return to that house, not until the truth is faced. Anthony's lips parted, but no words came. Isabel's eyes burned with fury, but for the first time her mask slipped. And in that moment, I knew the war had truly begun. The next morning dawned gray and heavy, as though the sky itself shared the weight in my chest. I moved quietly around the kitchen, preparing oatmeal for Lucy. She sat at the table, her doll still pressed to her side, her eyes following my every move. When I placed the bowl before her, she hesitated, then whispered, Can I eat now, Grandma? The lump in my throat nearly choked me. I forced a smile and kissed the top of her head. Yes, my love, eat. Eat as much as you want. Her spoon moved slowly, cautiously, but she finished every bite. I knew then that I could no longer wait. Action was no longer a choice, it was survival for her. Later that day, the sound of a car horn blared outside. My heart seized. Anthony and Isabel had returned. I looked at Lucy, her little body stiffened, her face paling in an instant. She clung to my hand so tightly it hurt. Anthony stepped out first, his face lined with exhaustion but softened by a forced smile. "Lucy, pack your things, honey. We're going home." From behind him, Isabel emerged, her arms wrapped around David, her smile polished, her voice sharp beneath the sugar. "Come on, Lucy, don't make your father wait." Lucy froze, then burst into tears. "Grandma, I don't want to go. I'm scared." The words, raw and desperate, echoed through the house like a thunderclap. Anthony staggered, his hand half raised as if to reach for her, but stopped midair. His eyes widened, torn open by the truth he could no longer ignore. Isabel's expression hardened. "She's being dramatic. Don't listen to her nonsense." I stood between them, Lucy in my arms, my voice trembling but resolute. "This isn't nonsense. This is abuse, and I won't let it continue." Anthony's face drained of color. He sank into a chair, lighting a cigarette with trembling hands, his eyes darting helplessly between his wife and his daughter. He wanted to deny it, but Lucy's sobs left no room for lies. Isabel, sensing her grip loosening, hissed, "You're exaggerating, Mrs. Johnson. This is a family matter. Stay out of it." I pulled my phone from my pocket, my hands shaking but firm. "No, Isabel, this is no longer just family. This is about the law, and about protecting my granddaughter." Her eyes widened. "What are you doing?" With Lucy pressed tightly against me, I dialed the number I had been keeping close in my mind, social services. My voice was steady, though my heart pounded like a drum. "My granddaughter is being abused. I need you to come now." For the first time, Isabel's mask cracked. Her voice rose into a shrill scream, but I didn't flinch. I had crossed the line of silence. There was no going back. The minutes after my call stretched like hours. The air inside the house was thick, trembling with unspoken fury. Isabel paced the living room, her arms tightening around David as though he were a shield. Anthony sat slumped in his chair, cigarette smoke curling around him, his hands shaking so violently he could barely hold it. Lucy clung to me, her face pressed against my shoulder, her sobs slowing to quiet hiccups. Every now and then she whispered, "Don't let them take me, Grandma. Please." Each plea carved deeper into my heart, fueling the fire that kept me standing. Then sirens. A sharp, piercing wail echoed down the street. Isabel's face drained of color. "What have you done?" she spat, her voice shaking with rage. Before I could answer, a knock thundered at the door. When I opened it, 2 social workers and a police officer stepped inside. The neighbors had already gathered outside, their whispers buzzing like bees. One of the social workers, a petite woman with gentle eyes, knelt before Lucy. "Hi, sweetheart. My name is Anna. I'm here to help you. Can you tell me what's been happening?" Lucy looked at me, her body trembling, her eyes wide with fear. I stroked her hair. "It's okay, my love. You can tell her. Grandma is right here." With a deep, shaky breath, Lucy whispered, "If I'm not good, Mommy Isabel doesn't let me eat. Sometimes she locks me in a dark room. One time everyone had paella, and I just watched. I was so hungry." Her words sliced through the room like a blade. Anthony dropped his cigarette, his face crumpling as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. Isabel's lips parted, her face contorting. "That's a lie. She's making this up." But Lucy's tears, her trembling voice, and the emptiness in her eyes were proof stronger than anything else. The police officer stepped forward, his tone firm. "Ma'am, you'll need to come with us for questioning." Isabel clutched David tighter, her voice rising into a shriek. "This is insane. She's just a child. Anthony, say something." But Anthony didn't move. His face was pale, his eyes fixed on Lucy, who clung to me like I was her lifeline. His silence was louder than words. As Isabel was escorted out, she turned to me, her eyes burning with hatred. "You'll regret this, Johnson." I met her gaze, unflinching. "The only thing I regret is not protecting Lucy sooner." When the door closed, the house seemed to exhale. I held Lucy tighter, feeling her small body finally begin to relax in my arms. For the first time in a long time, she whispered words that broke me in a different way. "Grandma, I feel safe." And I knew, no matter the battles ahead, I had chosen the only path my heart could accept. The days that followed were a blur of paperwork, interviews, and heavy conversations with social workers. Lucy was allowed to stay with me temporarily, and I did everything I could to give her back the simple joys she had been denied. I packed her lunch with care, walked her to school hand in hand, and each evening cooked her favorite meals without her having to ask for permission. Slowly, I began to see flickers of the child she once was, the shy smiles, the faint laughter when she played with her crayons, the way her little hand loosened in mine as trust returned. But justice demanded more than comfort. It demanded truth in a place where lies had flourished. Weeks later, we stood before the court. The grand hall was cold, its marble walls echoing every step. I held Lucy's hand tightly as we entered, her small fingers trembling against mine. She didn't have to testify in person, her recorded words would be played, but her presence was enough to remind everyone why we were there. Across the room sat Isabel, her face pale but her chin raised defiantly. She wore a mask of dignity, but I could see the cracks. Anthony sat beside her, his head bowed, his hands clenched together as though he were praying for the strength to face what was coming. When Lucy's testimony played her tiny voice, admitting she had been denied food, locked in the dark, forced to beg for what every child deserves, there was not a soul in that room left unmoved. Even the judge's eyes softened, though his tone remained stern and just. Mrs. Miller stepped forward, recounting the day she saw Lucy kneeling under the scorching Sunday. Her words shook, but her courage did not falter. Father Michael followed, speaking of the unnatural silence in Lucy, of Isabel's philosophy of firm hands and the glaring difference in how she treated David versus Lucy. Isabel tried to defend herself, her voice trembling. "I was strict, yes, but I never meant harm. I only wanted her to behave." But her excuses shattered under the weight of evidence, of testimony, of a child's broken whispers. At last, the judge delivered his verdict. Isabel was found guilty of child abuse. She was sentenced to prison, and Anthony was granted full custody of Lucy. As for David, he would remain with his mother, though Anthony had the right to visit. Anthony broke down in that courtroom, covering his face with his hands. Then he turned to Lucy, kneeling in front of her, tears streaming freely. "Forgive me, sweetheart, I should have seen it. I should have protected you." Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she whispered the only thing her little heart needed most. "Don't let me go back, Daddy." Anthony gathered her into his arms, sobbing, "Never again, I promise." And in that moment, I felt the weight of months of silence finally lift. Justice had spoken not just for Lucy, but for every child whose cries were buried beneath masks of lies. The trial was behind us, but healing is never immediate. Wounds of the heart take longer than wounds of the flesh, and Lucy's scars were deep. She stayed with me, her little steps gradually lighter, her voice slowly regaining the softness of childhood. One evening, I cooked chicken jambalaya, her favorite dish, though forbidden in Isabel's house. The aroma of spices and sausage filled the kitchen, carrying memories of better times. I placed a steaming bowl before her. She looked up at me, hesitation flickering in her eyes. "Grandma, can I eat it?" My smile wavered, but I nodded firmly. "Yes, my love. Eat as much as you want." This time, Lucy didn't nibble timidly. She took a full spoonful, then another, and soon her lips curved into the smallest, most radiant smile I had seen in months. "Grandma," she said softly, "I wasn't afraid to eat anymore." Tears stung my eyes, slipping down my cheeks as I stroked her hair. From then on, little by little, she began to blossom. At school, I saw her run again, clumsy, carefree, chasing balloons in the playground. One afternoon, she came home holding a drawing, beaming with pride. "Grandma, look, I drew our house, and you, and Daddy too." The paper was shaky, the lines uneven, but it was beautiful. It was hope. Anthony visited often, sometimes bringing David along. The two children played together in the yard drawing, laughing on the swing. But at times I noticed a shadow cross Lucy's eyes when she looked at her brother, as if the memory of those years had not yet released her. One day, she whispered to me, "Grandma, I love David, but sometimes I'm scared they'll love him more than me." I hugged her tightly, my voice steady. "No, sweetheart. From now on, you and David will both be loved, equally, by your father and by me. Always." As the weeks turned to months, I sat often on the porch, watching Lucy run under the sun with a red balloon in her hand, her laughter filling the air. The bells of St. Michael's Church chimed in the distance, as though blessing this new beginning, and I whispered to myself, "Thank you, God, for giving me the strength to protect her." But I also knew this. The greatest lesson I had learned was not only to love fiercely, but to fight against silence, because silence, left unbroken, can wound deeper than cruelty itself. For Lucy, for every child forced to whisper their pain, I carried a vow in my heart: never again.